So this is what we're making, an easily soldered chain, and slightly different in appearance. So I quite like that concept. I'm using 1.2 millimeter diameter wire, and I'm going to start by making about 9 or 10 3.5 millimeter inside diameter jump rings. I like using the cordless drill just because it's quick, but you can use a regular hand drill, or you can just hand wind your wire around your mandrel, or you can just buy jump rings that are soldered together, because all of these will be soldered before we assemble the chain. So I usually make 1 or 2 extras. And I just clip the extra bits off to get them out of the way. And for me, initially, I start just by holding the coil on my bench peg. You can get some of these fancy coil holders if you want. I usually don't bother with those until I get to the last few. Like I say, initially I just hold them on the bench peg. And I cut one at a time. And if I'm having trouble holding them, I just put my mandrel back inside and brace it against the end of the bench peg and break a blade. So I usually have 2 saws, and then when I break both blades, I'll put 2 new blades in. Now I'm just going to close all of my jump rings. So that we have a nice tight join, and then I'm going to lay them on my charcoal block and solder them all closed. So I'm just going to place my solder mix up the flux, and I'm going to flex the solder and that will also hold it in place on the charcoal block. And then I'm going to place the jump ring on the piece of solder. and we sit the join right on the solder. And then I flex the jump ring. Sometimes you have to hold the jump ring to keep it from moving around. And then we're just going to heat it and solder it. Now at this point you can use any torch, it doesn't really matter. But have your tweezers in your hand, because as soon as the solder flows, you need to shift your jump ring. And be careful picking it up, because you could make it into an oval. So I'm just kind of shifting it to the side. Ta-da! That's our jump rings. So now I'm just going to put these on a little piece of copper wire and put them in the pickle. And I'm putting them on the copper wire just so that I don't have to try to fish them out individually. In the pickle. Alright, we're out of the pickle. And at this point, check all of your jump rings to make sure all of the joins are soldered. That one isn't. If you have any that aren't soldered, solder them now. Now I want to make a 16 millimeter diameter jump ring, basically. And to know how much wire we need, it's the same old thing, the circumference of a circle, pi times the diameter. We have to add the thickness of the material, so it's 16 plus 1.2 times 3.14. So that's 54 millimeters. And I want 10 millimeters longer to overlap the end. So that would be 64. Let's make it 65. And the same size wire, 1.2. $65. And I think there will be about 9 of these, but I'll make one first. So I need to anneal the wire so that it'll bend easily, because this is half hard. So I'm just going to wrap this around my ring mandrel so that I get a nice circle. And I measured it with my calipers, and K is 16. So you can see that gives me a 5mm overlap by making it 10mm bigger. So now I'm just going to put that through 2 of my jump rings. And then I'm just going to spread this way and ball the ends. I'll show you. So I'm just holding this in my third hand. And I just melted the balls until they were about even with each other. So now I'm going to quench that in water. And bring the ends together so they touch. Like that. And then I'm going to solder that point. So we can just lay that on our charcoal block. Flux that spot. And I'm using a 3mm long piece of hard solder. And I'm placing it right where the 2 balls touch. And we shift these jump rings out of the way so we don't melt them. Ta-da! I could see the solder run between the 2. So we'll quench this once again so we don't burn our fingers. And then we'll make the next one. The next one being the next jump ring. 55. And we need to anneal this again and make a jump ring again. So I'm going to cut about 6 of these. Just to save time. So now I'll just wrap all of those around the mandrel at K, because I know that's the right size. And then we'll just assemble our chain. Another jump ring on. Take one of the ones on our first one and put it on. But just make sure that you put another jump ring on before you assemble the jump ring onto the next jump ring. So these are melted now, and you'll notice that I'm just closing the jump ring this way, just like you would a normal jump ring, but we just want to make sure that the balls touch and that we don't get our jump ring out of round. So by doing it that way, we know that we won't. So we'll solder that one and then do the next one. So you can see I'm holding my jump ring with the ends up and slightly spread so that I don't melt the wire next to it. And our same neutral flame, and then I'm just holding the tip of the inner blue flame right on the wire, and I'm coming up from underneath at a slight angle. And then when I do the next one, I just melt the ball until it is just past the end of the other one. That way when I bring them together, it won't distort the circle. So the last jump ring I made, I didn't put another jump ring on because I'm going to make a hook, and then we'll use an open jump ring to assemble the hook to the chain. So a 45 millimeter long piece, and we'll file the end flat. So you can see, nice and flat. Then we're going to take our flat round pliers and just, because these are 4 millimeter, we'll make a 4 millimeter loop on the end and just wiggle it until it touches, and it'll be a P or a D or a Q shape, and we'll solder that. So just lay it on your charcoal block, flex that spot, and a piece of hard solder. And I'm just going to pick it up with my solder pick because I want a little more accurate placement on this. Done. Roll it over, check the other side, and we'll quench it. In water. Now I'm just going to use my bench block and a jeweler's hammer, and my jeweler's hammer is slightly rounded like a planishing hammer, and I'm just going to hold that loop vertical and hammer that to half its thickness, half the wire's thickness. Then I'm just going to take my Swiss No. 2 cut flat hand file and just slightly round the end. And then smooth it off with my sanding stick. Hallmark it, and because I'm going to bend it this way up on this side of the loop, I'm going to hallmark that side, so when I come up it'll be visible. So now once again our flat round pliers, and I'm just holding that roughly in the middle, but we want that loop to be basically the same size as our jump ring, just for aesthetics. And we'll just put a little kick up and bend it to make sure that it touches. And we're ready to assemble it to our chain. So 2 pairs of parallel jaw pliers. Open sideways. And we put our hook onto our jump ring. Close this, making sure that the 2 ends touch. And now we'll just hang this on our 3rd hand and solder that one, and we're finished. So you can see I have my 3rd hand as far away from the joint as I can get it. And because this hasn't been soldered, it may have a little bit of oil on it. So I heat it up and then flex it. That way I'm sure that the flex will dry on the jump ring and be where I want it. Then just a small piece of hard solder. We pick up with our solder pick. And making sure that our flame only touches the jump ring. Our last solder joint. So now we'll quench and pickle and then bang it in the tumbler. And you can see that now our catch will look like that. And it will lay flat, so it'll be comfortable on the wrist. So in the pickle, and the pickle is sodium bisulfate. So now we're out of the pickle, and I'm going to put this in my rotary tumbler to polish it, and that's it. So here we are out of the tumbler. Finished. Now this is 8.4 grams, so less than $20. Not bad.